Hello, my name is Euro and welcome to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. In today's video I'll be showing you my Eldritch Ice Knight build, which will be a rogue fighter multiclass that is focused around dealing heavy melee damage, while being capable of dealing cold damage with our melee weapon attacks, while also having up to second level spellcasting, which will be more than sufficient for our needs. So let's get into the character creation. So for your race, I would suggest that you take the Dragonborn. Dragonborns are great because of their Dragon Breath attacks. They synergize pretty greatly with various elemental type builds, especially this one. And therefore, I'm going with, of course, the White Dragonborn, who has the Frost Breath attack. Now, also the Silver Dragonborn has the same Breath attack weapon, so you can go if you want a Metallic Dragon as well. We also get the Draconic Ancestry resistance to cold damage, which is quite handy. For our class, we're going with the Fighter, of course. We have here the second Wind ability, which gives us a 1d10 plus our fighter level heal, which is useful. For our fighting style, we're going with 2-weapon fighting. This, when we make an attack with our offhand weapon, we add our ability modifier to the damage of the attack. So basically, our offhand deals the same damage as our main hand because of the ability modifier. And we will be dual wielding for basically whole game. Only in the early levels, we'll dual wield light weapons, and then in the later on, when we get dual wielder, we'll be able to dual wield anything that is versatile or one-handed. For our ability scores, we're going with 17 strength, 10 dexterity, 14 constitution, and 16 intelligence. Strength will be our main damage dealing, so let's say ability score, and we'll be investing heavily into this later on. We'll get it up to around 22 if we get all of the bonuses for it. Dexterity, we have 10 here only because I don't want to have a negative initiative. We don't need it to be higher because we'll be pretty much running heavy armors almost exclusive with this character, and we can get additional initiative through some of the equipment. For our constitution, we have 14. This is named here just so we have slightly more HP. We won't be concentrating on that many spells. We will have a few, but we can cast those before combat starts, and if we lose concentration, it will not be too much of a big deal, so 14 constitution is fine here. Intelligence 16, we need this to be relatively high so that we can have some competent spellcasting. We will be increasing this a little bit later, up to 18, just so that we are somewhat accurate with our spells so that we can shoot enemies at a distance if necessary. For our skill proficiencies, I have it in athletics and intimidation. I chose these two just so I have athletics because it gives us resistance to being shoved and helps us shove, and intimidation is useful in dialogue. You can maybe move intimidation into survival or perception. These two are both useful. Survival, of course, for digging up buried caches or those chests, and perception, of course, for perceiving. Sometimes I think you get a perception roll for like buttons and levers and stuff like that, so this can be useful as well. Animal handling and history is not too useful, so I would probably not want to invest into those. So I will go what I had here into intimidation. Now for my background, I did go with the Guild Artisan. That is just my favorite background to pick. With Guild Artisan, you get proficiency in Insight and Persuasion. If you have any other background preferences, of course, as always, you can go with those. It is completely up to you. At level 2, we unlock our Action Surge and we can move on to level 3. At level 3, we unlock our subclass, and here we're going with the Eldritch Knight. This is going to get our start on the spellcasting. For cantrips, we're going with the Ray of Frost. This is a 1d8 cold damage dealing cantrip that reduces target's movement speed by 10 feet if it hits. So it works for us quite well, as of course we're trying to get cold damage dealing spells and cantrips. For our second cantrip, we're going with Friends. This gives you advantage on charisma checks against non-hostile creatures. This is useful outside of combat in dialogue because you gain, of course, that advantage. You just have to make sure that once you stop speaking with the character you cast this on, you leave the area before you stop concentrating or the time runs out. Because what's going to happen is they're going to accuse you of enchanting, and if you're nearby, you will be basically treated as a criminal and you will have trouble with the law. So just make sure you leave. For our spells, we're going with Shield. Shield is an amazing level 1 spell that is a reaction, and as a reaction, it can give you +5 to armor class, and it also makes you immune to magic missile damage. Though once activated as a reaction, it will last until it's your turn again, so all enemies that try to hit you, they will have additional 5 armor class to try and get through. Speaking of magic missile, for our second spell, we're going with magic missile. This shoots 3 magical darts that each deals 2 to 5 force damage, and they always hit the target. So this is a very good spell for ensuring you kill a target instead of getting unlucky and missing it like 4 times. I speak from experience. So this is a very good spell for pretty much always, especially in the early game, since missing is a lot more common, but in the late game it can be quite nice as well if you need to take out particularly dangerous targets. For the expanded spell list, I would suggest that you take the Ice Knife. This is a nice level 1 spell that deals 1d10 piercing damage if it directly hits, and if it misses it has a chance to deal 2d6 cold damage unless targets save the dexterity save. If they fail the save, they take 2d6 cold damage, and if it hits, they take 1d10 piercing damage. So it's a pretty nice level 1 spell to have. At level 4, we unlock our first feat and an additional spell. For the additional spell, we're going with the Protection from Evil and Good. This spell is pretty useful throughout the entire game because you will meet a lot of aberrations, elementals, fiends, and undead. When you cast this spell on yourself or somebody else, that target cannot be charmed, frightened, or possessed by the mentioned targets. And also those creatures that try to attack you, they have disadvantage against you, which is very useful to have. For the feat, we're going with the Dual Wielder. This is going to allow us to duel with weapons that aren't light. We'll get +1 bonus to armor class while dual wielding. Of course, we cannot dual wield 200 weapons, so weapons like great axes or great swords we can't dual wield, but things like staves or the long swords and even spears, we can dual wield those, so that's very useful. At level 5, we unlock our extra attack and we can move on to level 6. At level 6, we unlock our second feat, and here we're going to go with ability improvement and we're going to put it to +2. This is here just to help us get a little bit more of accuracy and damage, or well, accuracy with our spells. And I should mention for the strength that at level 5, you can do it at level 4, it's going to be a little bit harder, but at level 5 you can deal with anti-ethel. You can get a +1 in any ability point, but I would suggest taking it to strength because then you'll have a nice 18 strength. And then in Act 2, from the Blood Merchant, you can get a Potion of Everlasting Vigor, which gives you additional +2 into strength. So you should be ending Act 2 with 20 strength. And then in Act 3, when you encounter the Mirror of Loss, you can get another +2. So you will round up your build at the end with 22 strength, which will be very useful for you, as of course, we'll be mainly using our weapons and strength will scale off of those. Now for the replacement spell, we will actually replace one spell, but we will get it back on level 7. I suggest replacing Protection from Evil and Good. You will again getting it back the next level. This is just so we can get one of the expanded spell list, and here we're gonna take the Hand Sleep. A Hand Sleep is a very nice mobility spell that is a ritual spell if you cast it outside of combat. It triples the creature's jumping distance. Since we will have very high strength, this is going to allow us to have just really good mobility. Basically, we'll be able to jump next to anyone during combat. Just make sure if you want to use it or if you would use it, just cast this before combat starts because it's a 10 turns, so you'll have plenty of time remaining to use it after you cast it outside of combat. At level 7, we unlock second level spells. We also get War Magic. War Magic makes it that if you cast a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack using a bonus action. For us, this will not be too useful as we're dual wielding and we'll have a second bonus action. So this won't be too much for us. But if you are an Eldritch Knight with, let's say, one-handed weapon or a weapon and a shield, this can be nice for after casting a cantrip. But anyway, for our second level spells here, we're going to get back our Protection from Evil and Good. And now for the second spell, it doesn't really matter what we take here because none of these are really cold damage dealing spells. I will just take Shatter for now because next level we're going to be replacing it for something from the expanded spell list. At level 8, we get one additional expanded spell. Here I would suggest you take Misty Step. Misty Step is just too good to pass on. Surrounded by Civil or Mist, you teleport to an unoccupied space that you can see as a bonus action. So bonus action teleportation spell, just crazy good. And now for the replace spell, we're going to be taking the Shatter and we're going to be replacing it for the Enlarge Reduce. This is an okay spell for us. If we cast this on ourselves, we have to concentrate on it. It gives us 1d4 bonus damage with our weapons, and we also have advantage on strength saving throws. If we lose concentration, since we have relatively low constitution, it doesn't really matter. It's not too much of a big deal, but when it's there, we get a nice little boost to our damage and use for our second level spells. If you don't want this, you can stick with Shatter, or you can take something like Blur or Mirror Image. These are also nice. These are pretty nice defensive spells. This one gives you additional armor class, while this one gives disadvantage on enemies that try to attack you. So you have a bit of a choice here if you want to replace it when you replace Shatter. For our third feat, here we are going with the Savage Attacker. When making a melee weapon attacks, you roll your damage twice and use the highest result. So this increases your melee damage on average. This also works with weapons that have like elemental damage. For example, If a weapon has 1d4 cold damage bonus, it works on that 1d4 cold damage bonus as well, so you will roll higher on that score on average as well. It also works, for example, on paladins. They also roll that for when you use a divine smite. You reroll each of the divine smite dice and you use the high result. So overall, this is a pretty useful damage increase feat on characters that don't have great weapon fighting. At level 9, we're going to start our multi-class, and here we're going with Rogue. Rogue is what's going to get us our second bonus action. At level 1 of Rogue, we gain Sneak Attack. We will be able to trigger this with our offhand most of the time, because our offhand will be, I believe, a dagger. But yeah, there's a weird interaction with the offhand being a finesse weapon and main hand being a different type of damage, but I'll show that in the combat showcase. At level 10, we unlock our bonus actions. Here we have, or cunning actions. We have bonus action hide, dash, and disengage. These are useful for mobility or anything else you may want to do with them. It's nice to have them. At level 11, we unlock our subclass, and here we're going with the thief. This gives us an additional bonus action and gives us second story work. This is mostly useful during exploration. During combat, it can be nice if you need to jump down off a roof or off a high place and you don't take as much damage, so it can find its uses. And last, at level 12, we unlock our fourth and last feat, and here we're going with the Elemental Adept, and we are taking cold. What this does, it makes it so when you cast a spell or attack, your attacks ignore resistance to cold damage. In addition, when you deal cold damage with a spell, you cannot roll a 1. So overall, a pretty nice feat for us, because this works with our weapons, our magic, and our breath attack, which is very good. Alright, so that's it for the levels. I will now go into the equipment section. Alright, so here we are in the equipment section, so let's start with our headgear. Here we have Diadem of Arcane Synergy. When you inflict a condition, gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns, and what this does is weapon attacks deal additional damage equal to the affected entity's spellcasting modifier. So in our case, our weapon damage attacks, or our weapon attacks, will deal additional 4 damage because of the +4 intelligence modifier. For the cloak, I'm going with the Cloak of Protection, Armor Class, and Saving Throws +1. This is a pretty nice cloak all around. It can help any character. But if you want an alternative, if the Cloak of Protection is taken, you can take something like the Cloak of Displacement. At the beginning of the wearer's turn, the cloak activates, granting enemies disadvantage on attack rolls against the wearer. This is basically just granting you the effect of blur. You can also take the Cloak of the Weave if you really need to. We won't be using too many spells that require spell save DC and attack rolls, but if you really have no other choice, you can take this cloak then instead. For the armor, we're going with the Adamantine Split Armor. All incoming damage is reduced by 2. When a melee attack hits you, the attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns. Reeling makes it so that the target has penalty of -1 to attack rolls every turn remaining. So when they hit you once, they have a -3 penalty to attack rolls, and if they somehow hit you a second time, they'll have a -6. So this is a pretty good debuff to have on melee characters. And this armor makes you so attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer. For the alternatives, we have the Adamantine Scale Mail, which is basically just a weaker version of the Splint Armor. It reduces damage by 1 instead of 2, and sends targets reeling for 2 turns instead of 3. And also has this, attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer. But since we don't have any dexterity, we will have 16 armor class, so we will have 2 armor class less overall. So I would suggest that I would take this armor only if I don't have, or you don't have Adamantine Split Armor available. But then if you don't have it available, you might as well then take the Armor of Persistence. All incoming damage is reduced by 2. You gain resistance and blade ward, and you can be hit by critical attacks. But still, this is a very nice armor because it gives you blade ward, which halves bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which is pretty nutty armor. For the gloves, we're going with the Winter's Clutches. When the wearer deals cold damage, you inflict 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. What this does, it gives entities disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So basically, they will have a disadvantage on slipping on ice, so they'll most likely slip. But if there are 7 or more stacks remaining, they have to succeed a Constitution saving throw, or they take 1d4 cold damage and become frozen. Now, when they're frozen, they're incapacitated, and they are vulnerable to bludgeoning, thunder, or force damage. But as soon as they're dealt these 3 types of damage, the ice shatters. But for that one attack, you will deal double damage. So these gloves are going to trigger our Diadem of Arcane Synergy, so we will have Arcane Synergy basically during the entire combat encounter. And because we have extra attack and 2 bonus actions, we're actually able to freeze 1 target per turn if they fail the save. So if all 4 of your attacks hit, you will have 6 stacks, or not 6 stacks, sorry, 8 stacks, and then of course they'll have to roll this Constitution saving throw. For the boots, I went with the Hoarfrost boots. You cannot fall prone while traversing icy terrain. For the alternatives, you can take this into your Nightwalker. They basically do the same thing, this just the Nightwalkers are upgraded version, because you can't be inwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and you can slip or grease on ice, and you have Misty Step once per short rest, so 3 times per long rest. So these two are here. If somebody has Nightwalkers, you take Hoarfrost boosts, or vice versa, right? Then for our amulets, we're going with the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. When one of your cantrips deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, you add a spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt. So basically, this will add this +4 modifier to the damage with your cantrip, so your Ray of Frost will deal minimum 7 cold damage instead of 3, which is pretty useful. For the alternatives, you can take the Amulet of Misty Step. This gives you 1 Misty Step per short rest. So 3 per long rest, unless you are using the Potion of Angelic Reprieve, right? Because this after the effect ends, you have basically short rested. And then for the last one here, we have Surgeon Subjugation Amulet. Once per long rest, while scoring critical hit on a humanoid, the wearer can paralyze the target for 2 turns. This is not too useful for us because we are not stacking critical hit chance, but since we have 4 attacks per turn, we have a good chance of actually scoring a hit. So this, I would use this only if I don't have Amulet of Misty Step or Necklace of Elemental Augmentation available, even though you can find actually 2 of these necklaces in acts. I believe you find one in Act 1 in the Githyanki Crash, and you find the second one in Act 3 on like a ship that's, how do you call it? It's stuck on land, it's inside of a trapped chest, so you can get 2 necklaces in a single save. Then for our rings, we're going with the Snowburst Ring. When the wearer deals cold damage, they also create a 15-foot circle of ice around the targets. So this is why we need boots that prevent us from slipping, because we will be making a lot of ice terrain when we are fighting. And this is useful, of course, because when enemies that we hit, we encrust them with frost, and then they have disadvantage on actually slipping on ice. Well, disadvantage on saving from slipping on ice. For the second ring, we have the Ring of Free Action. You ignore the effects of difficult terrain. You can be paralyzed, restrained. This is nice so that we don't halve our speed when we are walking on ice. So this makes us have full speed. And being resistant to paralyzing and restrained is pretty nice. For the alternatives, you can take the Ring of Protection, same as the Cloak of Protection, +1 to armor class and saving throws, generally all around nice ring to have if you don't have anything better. And then, of course, you can take the Acoustic Band Ring, which gives you basically just a flat bonus damage of 2 acid with your weapon attacks. So yeah, these are just here if you don't have, for whatever reason, access to these 2. For our weapons, we're going with the Flail of Ages. Depending on what kind of damage this weapon does, it inflicts acid, shield, or burning condition. Because of us going as a cold damage element, we will be taking, of course, the cold damage element from the weapon. This will give it a +1 bonus to enchantment, and it will do additional 1d4 cold damage. And then whenever we hit somebody with this weapon, they'll be chilled, making them vulnerable to cold damage and resistant to fire damage. We don't care about the resistance to fire, of course, because we are purely dealing cold damage anyway, so this is going to synergize amazingly well with our character. Then for our offhand weapon, we are going with the Cold Snap. This is an enchantment +1 weapon. When a creature misses you with an attack, it must succeed a DC 13 Constitution saving throw or become chilled for 2 turns. This also inflicts chill on target, any target that misses you. And this has good synergy if, let's say, you have a wizard or a sorcerer with cold damage spells. Sometimes a ranged target will miss you and you will make them chilled, or you'll be surrounded by enemies and they will miss you and make them chilled. This way your wizard or sorcerer can benefit from this as well, since you aren't able to attack, let's say, 3 or 4 targets at once in one turn. And this also gives you a +1 to armor class, which is why we have such armor class, because of the dagger and the ring, not ring, but the cloak. And of course we're dual wielding, so we have another armor class from that as well. For the melee weapon alternatives, we have the Morning Frost here. When dealing cold damage, the wielder deals 1 additional cold damage, and when dealing cold damage with a spell, we possibly inflict shield upon the target. This is a very nice weapon to have for the early game, because it will be a 1d6 + 1d4 when we dual wield with it. So yeah, all around a pretty good weapon for our build. We'll be running this until we get Flail of the Ages or Trident of the Waves. On hit, create a 7-foot water surface on the target. So what this happens is you create a water surface, you also make the target wet, so you have then double damage against them with lightning or cold damage. And then the last weapon here we have is the Wave Mother Sickle. This weapon has advantage against wet targets. Now, this actually gives you advantage against wet targets with any weapon. This just gives you advantage against wet targets. So here we have two weapon combinations you can choose. You can go with the weapons that I have here, Flail of the Ages with the Cold Snap. So you have the ability to make targets vulnerable to cold damage regardless. Or the second weapon combination you can go with is the Trident of the Waves plus the Wave Mother Sickle. You will again have advantage against them. With this combo, you have advantage against those targets, and you also have the ability to make them vulnerable to cold. So this one generally has a little bit of more damage, but this one makes it so that you have advantage against those targets. You just have to make them wet with the Trident. But for our ranged weapon, we have the Hell Rider Longbow. Gain a +3 to initiative and advantage on perception ability checks. This is, we're using this weapon here mainly because of the initiative bonus. This is a stat stick weapon because we won't be really shooting with it. That's why we have our spells and cantrips. But if we were to shoot with it, we would possibly inflict Fairy Fire on a target once per turn. But again, this is a stat stick weapon, so we won't be getting any benefits from the Fiendish Fire. For the alternatives, we have the Bow of Awareness. This gives us bonus to initiative just as a stat stick. Same thing with the Hunting Shortbow and the Gandriel's Inspiration. This gives us advantage against monstrosity type enemies. These three weapons you will probably use in the early game until you get the Hail Rider Longbow. And then last thing to mention here, I have the Scroll of Conjure Elemental and Minor Elemental. The Water Elemental synergizes really well with you because they inflict Chilled with their standard attack. But if a target is chilled already, which they most likely will be after you attack them, then the Water Elemental with their multi-attack deals double damage against those targets. So that's very useful to have. And then Minor Elementals, you can summon the Cold Memphits, which of course, because when you chill a target, they will have double damage with their attacks against them. So you have some pretty good synergy here with these summons. Alright, but that is it for the equipment section. I will now see you in the battle showcase. Alright, so here we are at the Flaming Fist Battle Axe for yet another battle showcase. So before combat had started, I did cast Enlarge on myself and I did drink an Elixir of Vigilance so that I am higher in the initiative. Alright, so let's explain that what I mentioned before. If we sneak attack this guy, I have my sneak attack on Ask. If you look here, the sneak attack, the weapon that caused the sneak attack was a piercing damage dealing weapon, right? A dagger. But the sneak attack damage was bludgeoning. So what the game does is it doesn't actually take the weapon that caused the sneak attack to take its damage. It actually takes your main hand weapon's damage type as damage. So since this is a bludgeoning weapon, the sneak attack deals bludgeoning damage. This is only important is if, let's say, this guy was at 6 stack of Encrusted with Frost, and then the offhand was the last stack to freeze him. And if he was frozen and then you deal sneak attack damage to him, the bludgeoning damage will free him from the frozen state, though he will take double damage. So it only really is an issue, quote unquote, because if you want to leave him frozen. But if you don't want to, then it really doesn't matter. Then you can just leave sneak attack on like non-ask, right? So that's completely up to you. But now let's take a look at our breath weapon damage since it's now a 46. And of course it ignores resistances. Let me see if I can catch all three of these in the cone. There we go. Now, I would like to not attack my ally, but who cares? He's gonna get chilled a little bit. Alright, so if you look here, all of them got stacks of Encrusted with Frost, because it is of course cold damage. And then let's see if we can freeze one of these guys. So we just need to deal at least 3 more attacks to him, although I have a feeling he's gonna die before that happens. Yeah. They don't have enough HP, but if you look at our damage, it's 1d8 bludgeoning, reroll because of Savage Attacker, +2 from the enchantment, +6 from the strength modifier, 1d4 from enlarge, plus our spellcasting modifier. So our damage is actually going to be relatively high, even though it's a one-handed 1d8 damage dealing weapon. But of course, if we remove enlarge and we attack him again, we will just lose that 1d4 bonus, but we still have the 1d8 +2 +6 +4, right? Now, for whatever reason, I don't know if this is a new bug in a new patch, because this is a save in a previous patch. The Flail of Ages is not causing this guy to be chilled, so we're actually dealing less damage because he's not vulnerable to cold for whatever reason. I don't know what is the cause of that, but yeah, keep that in mind. Normally we deal here like 6 cold damage, 6 cold damage, so yeah, but Unfortunately, we are not able to freeze him potentially because they just have too low HP for us to deal enough to survive the damage we're dealing to them. But that is generally it for this card. You just, well, enchant your weapons and you go in and try to freeze your targets or debuff them and create a lot of icy terrain. And that is it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. I would appreciate it if you liked and subscribed for more Baldur's Gate 3 content, and I will see you in the next one.